Welcome to Six Count. I'm your host, Zara Wild, bringing you the voices and stories of jazz from Durham, North Carolina. Joseph, thank you so much for joining Six Count.
Yeah, thank you.
And I heard over Instagram that you got a new dog, so tell us about the newest addition to your family.
Yes, my fiance and I adopted a beagle from Independent Animal Rescue, which is a really great organization based in Durham. He's a beagle named Mr. Stanley, and he's very fun, and we're having a really good time with him.
Well, congratulations, as well as your upcoming marriage. So that's very exciting as well.
Yes.
Is she a musician?
She plays guitar and piano and used to play saxophone, and not so much maybe these days, but she can pick up instruments and make some things happen.
Well, congratulations. That is really exciting.
Thanks.
I'm wishing you the best.
Yeah, thanks.
And we were chatting a little bit before recording that you're from Carborough now, but you aren't originally from the Triangle. So Where did you grow up?
I was born in Greensboro.
Same.
Cool. Yeah. Great town. But I grew up in a town called Madison, which is a really small town, 20 or so miles north of Greensboro in Rockingham County. It's a population around 2,500 people. Growing up there in the 90s, there's a lot of tobacco farms and textile industry and just a really great kind of small town community and rural feel there.
But yet somehow you were exposed to not just jazz, but jazz manouche, which I feel like is a bit of a more niche aspect of the genre. So is that where you had your first exposure to jazz music, or where did that come?
It was the first exposure to that style of music, jazz and jazz manouche, that I can remember. And I'm glad you used the term jazz manouche, because jazz manouche is, I think, a more authentic and respectful term compared to gypsy jazz.
And was it in Madison where you first started listening and playing to jazz manouche? Yeah,
so I had a pretty unique experience. My guitar teacher, when I was 12, I actually started taking bass lessons with him, was a man named Rex Griffin. Rex was a real interesting person, and I got to know him very well. When I started taking bass lessons, the first lesson that I can remember was Rex put up a chart for a foggy day and kind of taught me some simple root fifth motion of how to navigate a bass line. But at the end of the day, he was a guitar player. He had some pretty interesting guitars in his house. He had a Gibson L5 on display and a Django style guitar. And I didn't really know anything about jazz at the time. I just thought the guitars looked kind of cool, but I knew that Rex was a jazz musician. And I don't remember when I first saw him play, but I knew that he, played that style of music. And when I was taking bass lessons, or when I started with taking bass lessons, and he put up what we call a chart, lead sheet for that song from the real book. I didn't know where that came from at the time. It was just a single page of music. I learned that, it was kind of stemmed from this style of music, jazz, and went to see him play probably when I was really young. And that's kind of where I got exposed to, jazz in general.
And were your parents also musicians, or was it just something that they wanted you to get into?
Yeah, so my dad sang in the church choir, and that was probably my earliest experience with music.
What kind of church?
Presbyterian.
Okay.
And my dad has a really deep voice, and so he He sings bass in the church choir.
Great for those Presbyterian hymns.
Yeah, absolutely. My family, they were musical. I had a great uncle who played guitar, and I had a cousin who led a really cool like hair metal band in the 80s and 90s. And
oh, nice.
So there was always kind of this, and my grandmother also played guitar and had a guitar in the house. So there's always this kind of air of music around. But, I really remember at 5 years old, my grandfather gave me a 3/4 size acoustic guitar that he got at a thrift store.
Oh, wow.
And encouraged me to play. And
did it work coming from a thrift store?
Yeah, it tuned up. And I remember going to a local music store in Eden when I was maybe 6 or 7. And I didn't know anything about tuning the instrument or what the notes of the strings should be. And they tuned it up for me.
That seems so young to me to be 6 and going to a shop to get your instrument tuned.
I mean, I remember being really fascinated with music at a really early age. Some of my earliest memories are watching MTV and just being so into the bands and the bands who could play instruments and make music. When I was 6 or 7, I remember kind of writing my first song on a guitar. It was just, I didn't know it at the time, but I was just strumming open strings and then fretting the D major scale on the high E string. And I tried taking lessons for the first time when I was 9, and something just didn't resonate with me. And so I remember I put the guitar down and just thought, well, I'm 9 years old. I should move on with my life, I guess, and not play music now. But then in middle school, I had some friends who wanted to start a small rock band, and there was one of my good friends in middle school. He had a Squier Stratocaster, and he could play Nirvana and Metallica and all this stuff. And then we had a friend who had a drum set, and we were all 11 at the time. My friend was playing guitar, and they said, well, we need a bass player. So I asked my parents for a bass for Christmas and got a Squier P bass and a little amp, and we would just make a bunch of noise in my friend's garage. And I remember thinking I need to get lessons and make this more formalized. And that's kind of how I ended up at Rex's house. He was living in Greensboro at the time and then moved to Madison and took out an ad in the local paper, the Madison Messenger. And my mom went to school with Rex growing up and knew him, knew that he was a nice guy, and gave him a call and set up a lesson. And that's kind of how we got connected. So I was 11 years old, playing bass, and I really remember that first lesson. It's the earliest memory I have of a lesson with him is that Foggy Day chart, simple walking bass. But like I said, he wasn't a bass player. But
something seemed to click with him in a way that hadn't with maybe previous instructors.
Yeah, I mean, from the outset, I was playing music. I was playing a bass line. He'd play the melody, and then he would do this thing called improvisation, and so basic kind of jazz form was a part of really my earliest music lessons. I thought it was so cool, and I thought him soloing was the coolest thing. I didn't know how he made it happen or made it work. I just remember thinking like, oh, I'm playing in a group. There was something cohesive about me doing one thing, him doing something totally on the spot that seemed to work. But he wasn't a bass player. He was a guitar player, and he was a really amazing guitar player. I guess when I was maybe 12 or so, it was like a few months later after I started those lessons, I asked if I could start playing guitar again, and I brought in my little 3/4 guitar that my grandfather bought for me. Started taking real guitar lessons with him.
That must have been a gratifying moment for him of like, oh, well, now I can really teach you something.
He always said that I seemed just very interested in music. Rex really loved his students, and he really loved when they really put in the effort to learn. And I think I was, in many ways, musically, I was really a clean slate. I loved music in general. I wasn't particularly drawn to jazz or rock or any one genre. I loved all of it. I just wanted to learn music from him.
And he is actually the founder of the Hot Club of North Carolina, which is what you played in at some point. So tell us about how you eventually became a member of his band.
Sure. So I had those initial lessons with him, and that went on for a couple of years. I was, sight reading all these tunes, and we were playing different, duets out of these method books. And then when I was 14, my grandfather again, my grandfather didn't really know much about guitars specifically, but
gave really great gifts.
Yeah, he gave me, life-changing gifts. I still have the guitars that he gave me. He gave me a sort of an ES-335 style semi-hollow guitar, a Washburn, that had the F holes in it. It looked a lot, I thought, like Rex's Gibson L5. I was like, my grandfather gave me an electric guitar with F holes. That means I should play jazz, right? I should get interested in that. And that was what I asked him. I said, hey, I got this guitar. It kind of looks like yours. You think you could show me some jazz stuff? He was like, absolutely. Yeah, and Rex, he started teaching me first chords. Rex was a great improviser, but his philosophy was really starting with chords. And I think there was some intention with that. In learning some of those chords, he taught me foundational sixth chord voicings, which are kind of the basis for the Django style, Freddie Green style. I started playing tunes using those chords, and specifically I started playing Django Reinhardt songs. And when I was 15, that summer, he booked, at least for a few months, our first gig, my first jazz gig in downtown Madison at Madison Dry Goods. And I started playing songs in public. We did that for a while and then, continued the lessons. And then when I was 16, he asked me to sub for his rhythm guitarist in the Hot Club of North Carolina. Yeah, so I started subbing at age 16 for the rhythm guitarist, and they had a regular gig at Tate Street Coffee in Greensboro near UNCG. Eventually, the rhythm guitarist moved away, but even before he moved away, Rex had me coming out to Tate Street. I wrestled in high school, and sometimes at those tournaments, they would write kind of your weight class on your arm, and I have photos of me, post-tournament or post-match with that writing still on my arm, playing at a gig.
Nice.
But yeah, so I guess I was 16 when I got involved with the Hot Club of North Carolina, and then I was pretty much the full-time rhythm player in the group, except when I was out of town or I went to graduate school out of state and had folks fill in for those gigs. But whenever I was home, I would always join right back in. And
where'd you go to graduate school and undergraduate?
Yeah, I went to undergrad at NC State, and I went to graduate school at the University of Illinois.
Okay.
I studied electrical engineering at both places, so kind of removed from music, but everywhere I went, I found a good community of people to play with. I met some of the people that I still play with today through the NC State Jazz Ensemble. I met Andy Powell, great bass player in Durham. We played in the NC State Jazz Band together, as well as Andrew Stark, who's a great drummer based in Durham. And then in graduate school, I had a really great teacher out there, Dr. Young Kim. His graduate work was focused on the improvisational techniques of John Abercrombie, who has since become actually a big influence on me. But I studied with Young Kim for about a year and a half while I was out there, and I would almost attribute his influence almost to the level of Rex's on me. I think with Rex, I built a really good foundation for certainly playing chords, but also kind of like the basics of harmony, and Young Kim really expanded that for me in some really great ways. So I was really lucky to have a couple of really good teachers. So at that time, the Hot Club of North Carolina was made up of Rex Griffin on guitar, Fred Lale on violin, Bob Bierman on bass. He runs the bass violin shop in Greensboro, and Brad Kokendorfer was playing rhythm guitar. They had a regular Monday night gig at this place in Greensboro called the Paisley Pineapple, which is now Natty Green's in downtown on Elm Street. Fred told me the story about kind of how this show came about to perform with the son of Django Reinhardt.
Yeah.
Babik is a source of this music. Mm-hmm. At the time when Babik was, visiting from France, he was touring with the François Vola Group. François Vola is a guitarist from France, and he is the godson of Louis Vola, who was the original bass player in the Quintette of the Hot Club of France. So
Oh, wow.
So François Vola was living in North Carolina, and he had this personal relationship with an original member of Django's band. So Babik was over playing with François Vola Group, and Rex went to see them. I think they were playing in Hickory.
North Carolina has so many amazing jazz connections. I love hearing these stories.
Yeah, and so Rex was, they had this weekly gig, and they were playing big, they played Belshare in Asheville, and they played other festivals and had a bunch of other gigs. From what I understand, the kind of Django jazz manouche scene in North Carolina was pretty nascent at the time. There weren't a lot of people doing it. Rex was pretty well known for it. So Rex went to see them play in Hickory, and after the show, Rex approached François and Babik and talked and said, "Hey, why don't you come to Greensboro and we'll do this gig?" Rex was very genuine, and I think when you're genuine in inviting people like Babik Reinhardt to play, and you show this level of respect, and they know that you know what you're talking about. There was just a real connection between them, and they accepted. They said, "Okay, well, if you can get a gig lined up, we'll come and play." And so they invited the François Vola Group with Babik Reinhardt to Paisley Pineapple on a Monday night, and they played upstairs. So it was, if you've been to Natty Green's in downtown Greensboro, there's an upstairs space, and that's where they played.
There better be a frame on the wall with the photo, I hope.
I have, so Dave Shepard, who ran Shepard's in Greensboro, which was a music shop, took photos, and I've seen a lot of the photos that were taken, and I have a photo of Rex and Babik at that gig in my house that I really love to look at, and it was actually a photo that Rex had in his house when I was growing up, and I remember looking at it when I would go for lessons. Very cool. A gentleman, Pat Kelly, recorded the performance, and I have that recording.
Oh, wow.
And so while I wasn't there, and this is a lot of context for how this kind of came about, the recording is amazing.
Yeah.
And on more than one occasion, Rex told me that night was really the pinnacle of his performance. I mean, they are playing so fast and so well, and the whole band. I mean, Rex, Fred, Bob, Brad. From what I gathered from Fred in talking to him about this gig, they were really nervous and they prepared a lot. It sounds like they were just having a blast. Like they were just on that night. They were just really on.
It must have felt so good to be with that level of musicianship with someone with that history and family. That just probably did feel like a once in a lifetime feeling. And I think that is so courageous of him to ask, although he sounded like this is also well in his league to be asking someone to do that. But I'm thinking of like my dad asking Michael Jordan after a game at UNC to go get pizza with him and his friends in college.
Yeah.
But, it seemed like a very memorable evening. And I'm sure it was a great memory for Babik as well.
Yeah, and when I was talking to Fred about this, I asked him. I said, what was the energy like? And he said the place was just packed with people. He said even people who didn't know the Hot Club of North Carolina came out because they were like, "This is Django Reinhardt's son. Like, I'm going to go see this." Mm-hmm. There was a ton of people. It was full of energy, and Fred. So the way it was structured was the Hot Club of North Carolina played a set. Then the Hot Club of North Carolina played a set with Babik. Then the François Vola Group played with Babik. So there was like 3 sets at least throughout the night, all, just amazing music. And Fred said that when they started and it was just their band, they said, we were playing our set and we were, playing with our group, and there was this kind of nervous energy because they'd be playing, they'd be looking over, and
right.
There's Babik Reinhardt, watching you play.
The son of the founder of the music you're playing.
Yeah, I mean, the one of the closest things you could get to Django,
yeah. Like Ellington in the room or something.
Yeah, I mean, just a whole other level of musician on so many levels.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I was almost at that show, so thank you for sharing. Even though I know we're a couple steps away.
Yeah,
but...
I wasn't there either. But having heard the recording and heard all the stories over the years, it was a one-time thing with him playing with Babik. But sometimes that's all you get with people like that. And I think for a guy who grew up in Madison like Rex and and the guys that were playing in the Hot Club of North Carolina at the time, I think that experience, I mean, it lives on with them. It was a really unique opportunity.
And I think we should mention you shared he passed in 2021, so may he rest in peace.
Yeah, that was a big loss for me. I'd known him for most of my life, and I don't know, music is such a part of my identity. I think right there with it is the the influence and role of Rex Griffin in that. And so I feel really fortunate to have known him. A lot of folks who knew him as a kind of a prickly guy, a little bit of curmudgeon-y, but if you really got to know him, you knew deep down there was a lot of heart and a lot of soul and a lot of care for the people he was close with. And so I'm really fortunate that I knew him at that level.
And sometimes it's when your expectations are high of like, I want you to be the best. And if I see that you're not, then that can be troubling, but perhaps more caring than if someone were like, well, you didn't do your practice and oh, well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he, especially on the bandstand, had extremely high standards. Anyone who's played rhythm guitar or bass with him, at least the folks that I sat beside of or knew who played with him, if you hit a wrong chord or something and Rex heard it, or he usually heard it, he would give you a look that it was just, it was like, I'm never going to make that mistake again. I'm never going to.
There went my night's sleep.
Yeah. Some of my lessons with him, and I remember having those experiences, on the bandstand at Tate Street, because that was really where, I cut my teeth a lot with learning that style of music and learning to play was Sunday mornings at Tate Street Coffee. It was a really great gig. Tate Street is an awesome place, but it was kind of it wasn't like we were playing at a high-end restaurant or something like that, but it was still a gig. It was still the gig. And Rex took it very seriously. So I remember getting some of those looks at Tate Street, but in rehearsal, he could also be like that. And sometimes a rehearsal for me was going to his house, and I really remember doing this, going to his house on a Saturday morning at like 10 a.m. He'd put on a pot of coffee, really strong coffee, and he would make breakfast or do whatever he wanted in the kitchen, and then I would be in the living room, which was, a couple rooms away from the kitchen, and he would put on a Django Reinhardt recording super loud. And I would have to play rhythm guitar to the recording with Django.
Oh, that's great.
And try to play along. And if I got off, he would yell at me from the other room like, no, that's wrong. Turn, start it over, go back. And so, yeah, I think to your point about standards, it was especially around music.
And when did you decide to found the Hot Club of Raleigh, and when did that come to the picture?
When I left Raleigh for graduate school, I was fortunate to, in Urbana, meet some really awesome people who are also interested in that style of music. And I played in this band called Wagon Fire. So that was kind of my first experience with a group playing that style of music that didn't involve Rex. I moved back to Raleigh after graduate school and kept playing with Rex and those guys. But, to go to Greensboro every weekend or, to try and play some of those gigs, or if we weren't playing a lot of gigs and I wanted to play more, I just wanted opportunities to play more kind of where I was based. And, I knew people in the Triangle who were interested in that style of music. We linked up. The original Hot Club of Raleigh was Stephen Ray, who unfortunately passed in 2018. Matt York on set. Stephen was the lead guitarist. Matt York on woodwinds. Andy Powell, who I mentioned, he and I are the two original members still in the group. And so that was around 2018. And Andy and I had played together in some other outfits playing that style of music. But in 2018, we got really serious about trying to do a really authentic jazz manouche band. So we called it the Hot Club of Raleigh. We played a lot at Watson Ward. We were one of the earliest bands that had regular performances there.
That was my first dance gig in the
cool.
Triangle.
Yeah, great spot for live music in downtown Raleigh. And we had a regular gig at Trophy Tap. It was called Trophy Tap and Table. Now it's called Young Hearts Distilling on Wilmington Street,
which has a ton of jazz now.
Yeah, absolutely. So eventually the group became me on guitar, Andy on bass, Devin Frazier on guitar, and Dexter Moses on woodwinds.
One of our most recent 6-count guests.
Yeah, Dexter's awesome.
And now you all are doing lots of different interesting things, and was curious your thoughts on what you hope for the band moving forward. And is it, in one way, everyone doing different things is a sign of everyone flourishing by pursuing lots of different groups and styles of music even. But what are your personal aspirations for the group at this time?
My hope is that we just continue to play together whenever possible. I don't know. There's something really special when we get a call for a, Django style gig, a Hot Club of Raleigh gig. And, we almost never meet up to rehearse. We, come in and sit down, and it just happens. It happens really naturally and is always really fun. Yeah, just playing as much as we can.
Is there a venue that might not even have jazz at the moment, or anywhere else that you would love to be able to play if that opportunity were to arise?
Well, I'd really love us to have an opportunity to play at places like the Sharp 9 Gallery or premier venues where people come out to see the type of music.
And who would know the people we're talking to about on this episode, like
Sure.
Django and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hope that can become in the books for 2023 or 24. So you have done so much work with the Hot Club of Raleigh, but that's not all. You've been able to branch out and do other things. Are there any collaborations that you want to speak to that have been memorable since coming back to Raleigh?
Sure. So I've been able to play, kind of with different people in trio or quartet formats and different venues, playing other types of music besides jazz manouche, including, more straight ahead stuff and fusion. And, I mentioned young Kim, who studied very closely the music of John Abercrombie. So I got really into playing like John Abercrombie compositions. I've been playing pretty regularly in a duo with a good friend, Hunter McDermott. We have a monthly gig at Lanza's Cafe in Carborough on the last Sunday. And that's always really fun. And then I've also recently gotten involved with kind of a noisy art rock band called Gallus Mag, although we're looking to change the name pretty soon. But yeah, I've been playing with Gallus Mag, and we put out a record this year, which was really fun. Kind of my first experience with recording music that wasn't kind of jazz music.
And did you feel like you wanted to race back to what's comfortable, or did you find
I'm having a really good time making a lot of really crazy noises with some pretty cool effects pedals that I've picked up over the years. I'm having a lot of fun with that band. I'd never played at the Station or the Cave or venues like that. I bought a Gibson SG and just have been playing really loud, noisy music, and am really having a good time with that.
So would you say it's fair that you've never grown out of your teenage self who likes playing loudly?
Yeah. I think anything that's kind of interesting or different, I think is fun. And I think it's doubly fun when that music can be super loud, if it's jazz or otherwise. But I don't know, playing really, really cool stuff with effects is something that I never really had the experience to do before outside of my office or my bedroom or something like that. And so to be able to do it with a band of really talented musicians is really fun.
That's great. playing with the Hot Club of North Carolina, I'm sure you had a lot of mentors just through that group alone and with the guests that might have come from. Any that you want to shout out in particular or who had a big impact?
I played with some really awesome people in the Hot Club of North Carolina over the years. And the people who I think I played with the most and who had the most influence on me personally and musically were John Pasquini, who's a really great violinist, Fred Lale, who I mentioned, who was also on the gig with Babik. I played with Fred a lot over the years. Jesse Epperson, who is a bassist, also who lives outside of Madison, but he uniquely played a washtub bass, and he actually played the washtub bass on the gig or on the tour, the small tour that we did with Frank Vignola in 2009. So that was it was a pretty interesting group that played with Frank, which similar to how Rex got Babik to come play in Greensboro, it was a similar kind of experience with Frank Vignola. So we had 3 dates with Frank in 2009 summer. We played at Mac and Mac in downtown Greensboro, in Raleigh at Marsh Woodwinds Upstairs, and in my hometown Madison at Madison Dry Goods. And the group was Rex, John Pasquini, Jesse Epperson on the washtub bass, Sam Sewell, who's a really great drummer who played just like a snare drum and a hi-hat, and me. And so those were really some awesome musicians that I had a chance to play with very, very early on.
Very cool. I'd love to see a picture of that bass.
Yeah, he actually, when I was in college, I expressed interest in him helping me build one. I was an engineering student. I was kind of interested in building stuff, and I went to his house and he helped me build one, and I still have it.
Very nice.
And also at the gig with Frank in Greensboro at Mac and Mac, one of the Triangle's really well-known jazz guitarist, Scott Sawyer, was also in the audience.
Okay, yes.
And Scott, he tells the story all the time when he and I get a chance to hang out. We were playing with Frank, and we took a set break. Rex goes over to Scott, and I think he was just really thrilled that Scott was there. Rex and Scott were good buds. Rex just handed Scott a guitar and told him to go up and play with us. And so at one point in the show, it was everyone in the band except for Rex, and Rex was just sitting back watching this happen. So it was like the group with Frank Vignola plus Scott Sawyer, and that was a really cool. I forget what tunes we played, but it was really fun.
Very cool. As a band leader in this style of jazz, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the Triangle scene's appetite and the opportunities available for jazz manouche specifically.
There's definitely an appetite, and I think that you mentioned how like North Carolina has this kind of vibrant scene, and there's like Steve Carlo with the Hot Club of Asheville, and there's still folks around Charlotte and Greensboro who play, and then there's like a scene in the Triangle. There are definitely scenes across the state, and I think in North Carolina, a lot of it has to do with there being a really, I think, obvious crossover appeal to like bluegrass and folk music, not just because it's cool music or acoustic music, but also the instrumentation is very similar, and there's a lot of crossover appeal. So I definitely think there is an appetite. I mean, when people have come out to see us play and they haven't heard that style of music before, they're always just so intrigued by the sound, and they're like, well, it sounds like I'm in Europe, and we're like, well, that's kind of the idea. that's kind of where it stems from. And the musicianship is great. It's a great community. It's small. I always like to say that it's small but mighty. Like it's extremely supportive, and I really wanted to take an opportunity to acknowledge Richard Badu. So Onyx Club Boys organized a jam at the station in Carborough before the pandemic, and then in the pandemic, the station shut down and there was no jam. One of the attendees was Richard Badu, and he took it upon himself to kind of self-organize a Django jam in Hillsboro at his house. So it was kind of if you knew Richard or you knew someone who knew Richard, you could get an invite to this jam because, at the time things were really rough. So they were trying to keep the group small. But it was outdoors and all through the pandemic it's still going on a weekly basis, all through the pandemic. This was a weekly opportunity for this community and people even outside the community who were just interested in playing with other musicians to get together and hang out and play music. And it was all outdoors. And I mean, even in the peak of the pandemic, like winter 2020 and 2021, I bought a small gas heater that I would sit beside of my chair, and we would wear big coats and gloves and still play. Richard organized that, and it not only provided a means of community and support during a very difficult time for everyone, but also since then it's really built even a bigger community locally, and people have started bands, or they ask musicians that they've met at the jam to join or sit in for gigs. And yeah, it was just a really awesome opportunity for musicians to play together during what was a really challenging time.
Absolutely. Especially the social element itself was probably a lifeline for so many. So
sure.
Very cool. And anything else you'd want to share about what's on the horizon for you as a musician? Maybe not in terms of gigs, because you mentioned you're soon to be married.
Yeah.
But anything else that is kind of coming up for you?
I've been studying a lot or working a lot on solo guitar. And I've actually gotten into playing a 7-string jazz guitar, which is kind of almost like another dimension. And that really came about in the last couple of years through and getting to know Scott and Julia Buffington, who own Evans Custom Amplifiers. Evans is a very highly respected steel and jazz guitar amp company. Although their amps can be used for other things, I use their amps for my work in Gallus Mag, so they can get super loud and really sound great. But Scott plays 7-string jazz guitar in the style of George Van Eps. Kind of showed me how to navigate that a little bit, and so I've been doing a lot of solo performances with and otherwise with 7-string guitar. I mentioned how I'm kind of working through some contemporary music of John Abercrombie, so I'm kind of I'm pretty interested in songs of that type, kind of 21st century ECM label type sounds. Those also leverage some pretty interesting effects, or can, and so I'm kind of exploring that.
You sound like an engineer.
Yeah, well, it's all it hasn't hurt to understand kind of the aspects of the electronics and the signal processing and how how those things can fit together in interesting ways.
Problem solving and methodical and
and also debugging. Like if you stack two things that don't work quite well, figuring out how to make them work.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining again, and I look forward to hearing the Hot Club of Raleigh next, or maybe you around town with some of these other collaborations.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks a lot.